Hello and welcome back to our DropTime video series. My name is Joe, and this is video number 3 entitled Roles. I'll be going over how to create and modify your roles, as well as how the role you have assigned to a user is tied to your license and billing. The first thing you'll want to do here at the dashboard is to go up to Admin and then down to Roles. You can see we have a number of example roles here. Many of these will be in your account when you have access to it and that gets sent over to you. We're going to go ahead and edit one of these roles so you can see the different options. Starting off here in the general screen, we can see the name of the role, the license type. Right now this is a read-only. That means that they can only see the schedule. They cannot make any changes to it. In some cases, they may also be able to run reports. This is a lower licensing type. You would most likely have more read-only licenses than you have full access. Full access, of course, does have more privileges in the system than a read-only account does. It can make modifications to the schedule, to users, categories, roles, etc. Just generally has a more advanced level of permission than a read-only user does. Another thing to keep in mind here with a license type is the license type of full access does not necessarily restrict the other settings that you can enable at all. So theoretically you could have a person with full access here be restricted to a read-only type of view on the schedule. In the inverse of that, the read-only license type will override other settings. That way it can enforce the restrictions that are required to get the lower and discounted priced user license. Down below here we have checkboxes for cannot be scheduled and cannot be logged in. Fairly self-explanatory, but the cannot be scheduled one is one to keep an eye on. If you have different plant managers, overseers, people that may not necessarily be scheduled on a time block or a dispatch, but you still want to have access to the system, check that box there if they're assigned to that role. That way they don't show up in your pick list when you're assigning them to dispatches. Next we have the Area tab. This will show the different areas that this role has access to, anything from categories to reports to billing. Next we have the Schedule section. This will dictate what parts of the schedule they have access to and how. So you can set the schedule to read-only. That ties back with the licensing type. You can limit their access to no plants, only accessible plants, or all. If we select the specific accessible plants, that gives another option on the left. Down below, you have the ability to add on-the-fly category items, as well as the ability to post a schedule, which ties into the alerts. Going now into that next area, we can see the interface here to add accessible plants. Click on the Add button on the right here. This will give you two different lists, a left and a right list. What I would want to do is select my options on the left, click this top arrow to move them to the right. I can also click this arrow here to move everything from the left list to the right list, and vice versa with this bottom button here. To temporarily save these changes, I can click Add Accessible Plants. Please keep in mind that once they're here in this list, it will not fully save until I click this Save button in the top right. That goes for any option or change, modification, etc. that I make while I'm in here editing this crew. Moving on now to the Administration tab. This will go over what user accounts you have access to, whether they're tied to your specific accessible plants or you have access to everyone, what roles you can assign. Most administrators will want to have all selected there. That way, any roles you add in the future, you'll automatically be able to assign to your new users. If you do not have all selected, anytime you add a new role, you would have to come back into the role that you have assigned and modify that list. So that's a good option to have selected there for your admins, your plant managers, your managers, etc. Down here we have a checkbox to view and restore deactivated users, as well as allow adding and modifying Outlook report profiles. Next up we have the Categories tab. Same interface as the accessible plants, but for what categories you have access to. specifically ones that you can edit up here in the items area. So I can move them over from the left list to the right list, click on add categories, and they get held here until I save. Now we have the alerts tab. This is specifically for plant managers, admins. If you want to be CC'd on scheduled change alerts, if your plants have changed, you would check this box here, and I'll go over alerts in a later video. Second to last, we have views. Shows if you can add, edit, or delete public views, if you can have private views. Last but not least, we have security tab, which is just the session timeout. This is the number in minutes that you will be logged out automatically if you leave a session open. So right now by default it is 240 minutes. So now that we've added all our changes here, and click on save, and those changes will go through, and now they've gone from a read-only to a full access. I can always go back and edit. I can delete a role by clicking the close delete box here. Any of these I can delete. I can also select any of the roles by clicking the checkbox on the left as well.